Amazing that so many people are joining us today, this morning / evening, for this conversation hosted by Frieze in partnership with Focus, showcase of contemporary art from Southeast Asia, led by STPI Creative Workshop and Gallery in Singapore. My name's Amy Sherlock. I'm the deputy editor of Frieze magazine here in sunny London. Today's topic is a big one, the future of biennials, no less, which is both somehow a perennial question, I think, in art and culture discourse, and one, of course, like so many things, that has been made newly relevant by the current pandemic. So with me to discuss this and some of the ways forward, I'm delighted to be joined by three guests who have extensive experience in staging large-scale international exhibitions. Natasha Jinwala is a curator and writer. She is, with Daphne Ayers, co-artistic director of the 2021 Gwangju Biennale, which I believe is being installed as we speak right now. She's also the artistic director of COLOMBOSCOPE in Sri Lanka. She's an associate curator at Gropius Bau Berlin, and her other recent curatorial projects include the Contour Biennial 8 and part of the exhibition Hello World, revising the collection at Hamburger Bahnhof Berlin in 2018. And she was also part of the curatorial team for the last edition of Documenta. Dr. Apinan Poshyananda is the chief executive and artistic director of the Bangkok Art Biennale. I believe maybe we're actually getting a small glimpse of the Bangkok Art Biennale behind Dr. Apinan there. So that's the second edition of the Biennale, which runs until, I believe, the end of this month. Dr. Apinan has served as Director General in the Office of Contemporary Art and Culture, the Director General of Cultural Promotion, and the Permanent Secretary and Acting Minister in the Ministry of Culture in Thailand. He commissioned and curated the first Thai pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2003, and he's curated and directed numerous art exhibitions all over the world. And finally, Reem Shadid is an independent curator and researcher. Between 2006 and 2020, she was the Deputy Director of Sharjah Art Foundation, where she was instrumental in developing and managing the Sharjah Biennial and the Foundation's public and curatorial programs year-round. During the early days of the pandemic last year, she launched her radio show, Listening with Reem Shadid, which is hosted by Radio Al-Hara, which brings together artists and researchers looking at the intersection of sonic, visual, and literary production. So I suppose to begin, as a kind of bit of context to this discussion, in 2020, according to the Biennial Foundation, there were 273 active art biennials across the globe. And that doesn't count design events and doesn't count triennials. It's a huge number, more than 5 times the number that were listed a decade ago in 2010, which goes to show how important that format has become as a site of encounter for arts and culture globally. There's, of course, many good reasons why a city or an organization or a commercial enterprise might want to set up a biennial, which generally have to do with either bringing international arts to local audiences or international audiences to a particular locale, or both, normally kind of both of those to varying degrees. But of course, that proliferation, which is predicated on international travel, on kind of cultural tourism, and specifically of the mobility of a specific class of art professionals, I think has its problems. And the fact also that the calendar itself has become so saturated over the past 5-10 years, I think is also something that many people have begun to kind of reflect on. But maybe to begin briefly, before we kind of jump in and dissect whether the biennial is over, or what the challenges and opportunities might be, I think that it's probably quite interesting also for the audiences to kind of understand from you guys and your own particular experiences why biennials in the first place. So I don't know whether maybe Dr. Apinan, you want to kind of kick that off, since this is the second edition of the biennial, and also one of the very, very few that went ahead last year in spite of the pandemic.
Okay, Amy, I think it's even 25 years ago when people started complaining, and they actually called it biennial or biennale virus. And now we are facing this analogy of the virus. So I think the proliferation intense growth of biennales, we have to really look at how each nodal point is actually defined. Because the challenge of the old structure of biennales, whether it be Venice, Sao Paulo, or Sydney, have been ongoing for a long time. And each place has its own exoticism, as it were. The place where they have the heritage, have their own offerings for the people to visit. It could be 200, it could be 500. But the people who complain most are people from the West, because they have to travel to all these places and they don't have the money for it. So the places that they have, in Asia, Australia, Middle East, or whatever, these are the places where is regionally attraction within. So in that way, I would call it the Biennale variants, because now we're talking about COVID variants. The Biennale variants are going to be ongoing. It's not going to fade away. It's going to metamorphose and transform itself according to the conditions. And we live in a fractured world, and it's very much, the suffering of the economy. And those who come out better or faster will be able to adapt. Because at the moment, for the past year, we're talking about survival. We're talking about survival navigation in terms of economy and life. And what come last? The things that come last is sports and art. Because people feel you see, the COVID make us think internationally, universally. And COVID, from princes to paupers, from the rich to the poor, they attacked everything. So in that way, people forget that art as a nurturing tool is so necessary to have, especially at this time. So I'm just saying that, we can talk about it because Bye Biennial has been talked 25 years ago, and it's not going to be a Wiedersehen, au revoir, farewell. It will survive, and it will change and adapt accordingly to the places where it's going to carry on.
I think all of that is kind of absolutely valid, and I want to come back to you on a couple of points there. But I do wonder if there is that this is a kind of a tipping point, and that, exactly as you say, there are certain variants that will prove themselves successful and that will come out of this context and survive. But I do think of 273, there's probably going to be some that are not, there's probably not going to be 273 on that list of institutions next year, the year after. And I suppose one of the things that I wanted to speak to you guys about, and maybe I'll bring Natasha in on this, as you're kind of working you're in this right now, is how has the pandemic reframed your sense of who your audience is?
Thanks. Thank you, Amy. And also, it's wonderful to see so many colleagues and peers watching us, listening in. Again, it's a very difficult time to produce answers. Also, rationality fails us in many ways. I'd like to just mention, before going into the dramas and challenges of pandemic. I mean, the fact is that right now I'm actually on my 12th day of mandatory quarantine in a Korean hotel on the 15th floor as I speak to you. So it's also about, what are we doing in the name of the Biennale? What are we doing as guests? What are we doing as hosts in the framing and mobilizing of Biennales today? I believe that the Biennale is a process-led entity more than any other, in the sense that there are always various kinds of pressures at play. And I can tell you that as an independent curator over 10 years, coming from India, there were a lot of structural issues. There were a lot of structural hierarchies that one needed to navigate. And the Biennale did become already a sphere in which that play between fragility and resilience, that mode of creating a certain kind of horizontal process that, you know, is also a work of diplomacy. It is not only a process of cultural tourism. You know, there's that tag of cultural tourism is one that has also jeopardized in many ways some of the bold and generative processes that biennales have actually taken on board. So I would like to mention that in terms of the 13th Gwangju Biennale, the fact is that we did observe what the legacy has been in this case of Asia's largest biennale historically, in the sense of, you know, of course, it's not about how many artists there are. It's really also, you know, about even the load of bureaucracy. You know, you feel the largeness of it. So the fact is, for us, we really thought, you know, we're going to commit to a certain number of practices. So we're going to have 69 artists. During pandemic, we have managed to have 40 commissioned works. This was only possible because we started our process in a way that we ensured that 20 artists, and I'm just giving numbers in case it helps, you know, to kind of picture the fact that 20 artists were doing research visits to Korea, which were extremely intense and happened very early on. So we were quite lucky to be, you know, to be able to complete a part of this big circle. There have been many challenges that, you know, we were not able to be in Korea for a year after the last research visit. So, of course, we have learned a lot. You know, a lot of it has been on the go. A lot of these lessons, I think, for all of us, have not been processed. It's been a real learning on the go. And you know, in that sense, of course, we are thinking, you know, what is it that we want to let go of at this time, and what is it that feels so crucial to this model in terms also of a certain kind of futurity, even a tentative futurity. So I mean, I'll stop there and maybe then we can continue the round.
No, I think that that's absolutely, I think in terms of this moment kind of providing a lens through which might allow a certain focus on what to keep and what we want to let go of in this kind of system is a really important point. I do want to push you both a bit more though on this question of audiences. And maybe also Reem, this would be a good place for you to come in and speak about Sharjah, which you were kind of involved in from a very early point, which has always been something that was, as I have perceived it, obviously from the outside, as both, I suppose all biennials are, but both international facing and about a certain level of engagement with a kind of local community. Can you speak about maybe how that balance between the local and international shifted over the course of your 14 years in Sharjah?
Yes, I mean, I think it's important to maybe contextualize like Sharjah Biennale specifically, that it started in 1993 as kind of a cultural diplomacy project by the Emirates of Sharjah, by the government, basically. And it was not until 2003 that Hur al-Qasimi, who is still the director and the president, basically changed it into from kind of national pavilions into kind of a like a thematic exhibition after visiting Okwi's Documenta actually in 2002. So I think in 2003 when this shift happened, and it stopped basically involving other governments, there was a shift in audience there. I mean, I wasn't there at the time, but I believe that there was a shift in audience there. And then I remember when I was there in 2006, to be honest, there was very, very few. We had a great biennial in 2007, but there were very few visitors because there was no real, I mean, the foundation wasn't there at the time. It was just the biennial every 2 years. And there wasn't really kind of like a continuous, any form of continuous public programming for the audience, for the local audience there. So while, you know, I would say that between 2005 maybe, or 2003 maybe, I'm not sure, I wasn't there in 2003 and 2005, but up until 2011 or 12, it really, I mean, there were, of course, you know, great efforts to involve the kind of the community, but I would really say that it felt more like a parachuted event into Sharjah. And it was only after 2011 that there was this kind of realization, and after the foundation had formed in 2009, that there was this realization that there needs to be more local involvement if we want this to be for the local, as a public institution, if Sharjah wanted it to be for local audience, then we need to have this kind of sustained and continued engagement, which the foundation did through education, through year-long exhibitions, through kind of a lot of public programming. But I would say that the balance, there was definitely a shift to kind of a local audience. So I would say that that is kind of how, through this continuous public programming between the 2 years, is I think how that could be balanced. Yeah.
And I suppose maybe to come back to Apinan, when you opened the biennial in Bangkok last year, obviously there was a moment at which most international travel was kind of grounded. So clearly you felt, maybe you could talk a bit more about why it was so important for you to kind of go ahead with the show, and also who it was for in its kind of conception. And I mean that in the kind of broad sense of who it was for, and how that maybe was slightly modulated in the very specific circumstances in which the biennial was mounted last year.
Okay, thank you, Amy. In 2018, in our first edition, we had over 2 million visitors, 20 venues. But mind you, this is all free. Our Bangkok Art Biennale was free. And we thought that our second edition has to continue. And we actually chose the theme. The first one was Beyond Bliss. This edition was called Escape Routes, which became very, very appropriate. We actually announced the theme in Shanghai in November. And this was during our selection process. And in December, we found out that there is a thing called COVID. We didn't take it seriously to begin with because we thought that it would just go away, like most people think. But in January, we had a lockdown and we came back, life came back again around May. And we had heard already that so many events have been postponed or canceled, and there's some hopes, not just in art. Tokyo Olympics was on the verge of yes or no. But in May, we had a meeting at our Bangkok Art Biennale Foundation, and we thought that we have to decide whether to postpone like others or pursue. And in the end, I don't know why, but they said, go ahead. But go ahead meant a lot more strains, and many attempts have to be made in order to survive. Because like Natasha, she was saying that, the artists came already to do their surveys, and they were, we actually have 75 commissioned artworks. And in the end, now we have 82 artists. And some of the artists were isolated or quarantined, or, back home, they could do nothing. And they actually changed their subject. The theme of escape routes to them became, more introvert, isolation, and death, and how to get out of this dilemma. We actually opened in October, and we continued from then to now, and we have over 360,000 visitors, in our 10 venues, and more than 2 million those who attend and take part in our 40 odd activities on virtual. So in this way, I'm just gonna say that the lesson learned, because you have to go through things that you never learn or never know, like fit to fly. What is fit to fly? What is quarantine? What is social distancing? And this became part of the artworks, because we have our volunteers now. They dress up as this PPE, in instructors. So in this way, we actually learn with the audience. And the audience who come, they have to learn how to look at the art in this, what is called the new normal, whereby, we have a lot of videos. We have works by Ginwala, installations by Ai Weiwei, big installations by Anish Kapoor in the temples. Our main projection since our first edition was to put contemporary artworks in temples, and we chose heritage sites like the reclining Buddha temple and the Temple of Dawn, whereby we actually had to construct, sending, works. Logistics was, right, real hell, to get the thing over and to get the artists and the assistants over. And then this became extra costs. And we thought that, we each day, it was like each day of survival. And now we're counting. And actually, we're supposed to be ending at the end of the month, but we're going to extend it until next month in some venues. So that's madness, and we enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, definitely, I want to speak about the kind of digital, and maybe also both Natasha and Reem to kind of talk about the possibilities that this kind of pivot, the necessary pivot to digital opens. But I think that I want to just preface that by saying, to tie into what you were saying, Apinan, about installing artworks in temples. For me, the pandemic period has really been a period of the reinforcement of the aura of the artwork, that actually being in the present, something that, has been dismissed or kind of revived at various points, and something that you don't really reflect on when you have the opportunity to be in the presence of artworks with other people all of the time. And also the idea that art is a social space, that works create around them the possibility of networks and discussion, and how vital, and this might be a case for the continued importance of a biennial format, is to have the possibility to experience art in person with other people has really been not having it. You don't know what you've got till it's gone, I suppose. The old song rings true. But Natasha first, and then maybe to Reem, to talk about the kind of digital landscape, and I suppose some of the possibilities that offers.
Sure. Yeah, I'd just like to also mention that with the Gwangju Biennale, of course, there has been an immense Korean public from various cities, and obviously Gwangju at the very center, that have an ongoing relationship with the Biennale. And every edition in that sense creates, new kind of growing networks also within the local scene, and we are simply kind of also benefiting from the richness and the diversity of what that has meant, also in challenging the terms of engagement in Asia itself. And that's again what I wanted to mention with what Dr. Apinan mentioned. I mean, the question of the regional, and certain kinds of models have had a very dense relationship with regionality. And again, really also thinking through the kind of political and social hierarchies of Asia and Asianness. How do we from Gwangju think about that today? I mean, that's also something that we're concerned about. So one is the very local, but then is also this broader question, which we must consider. At the time where there is so much stigma and such a kind of naive way to think about how Asia is handling this, and how Asian culture is also dealing with this question of the pandemic and the arts during the time of pandemic. So that's just to preface your first question. And the second, with the digital landscape, I mean, I actually have to say that our team, definitely IS and our team, basically we had already thought very much about the timeline of the Biennale, how we could frame it in a way that our publications and programming would start at the same time as the artist research. So I'm very pleased to share that we in fact already had plans for an online publication and web platform well before the pandemic. What changed was our online forum, and our forum was supposed to be a 4-day forum in Gwangju, which was called Rising to the Surface, Practicing Solidarity Futures, very much thinking about the history of the Gwangju uprising. The 40th anniversary was last year, but also what kinds of social turbulence and citizen movements are reshaping the world today. So we've had participants from Brazil, Sudan, Indonesia, a lot from Gwangju, of course, from India, so in a sense, our forum actually extended from a 4-day event to a 3-month event. Right. And we're just going to close with the last part of it. So we have been improvising, but certain structural decisions enabled this to not become a sort of a panic narrative, but rather something that actually can sustain also, without kind of being completely burned out. Obviously, we have, a team in 7 countries. So it was very important to make these decisions with a lot of consciousness and not as an overnight sort of decision.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wonder if, Reem, do you have anything to add on that front?
I think the digital, for me, it's been difficult for me personally to see any form of exhibitions online, I have to admit. I think and I agree with you that there's something about the aura of the artwork and kind of the presence in it. But I mean, just in terms like to address your specific question, I think it's allowed, even though it's exhausting, of course, Zoom is really exhausting, but it's allowed, I think, me personally, and I know other friends and colleagues also feel the same way, to kind of connect and make connections with people that maybe you wouldn't have had the chance because actually travel is difficult or because the calendar is too full, even though there is actually a surplus of production now with all the digital and online means. But it definitely allowed me to be part of like assemblies or to form study groups that to be honest, otherwise I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do if we didn't have to go to it. So I can't, so even though I have, I have a lot of doubts about, digital or online as a kind of a medium to experience or to engage with art, I think I definitely cannot completely, dismiss it, because it has allowed certain connections that otherwise would have taken me, much longer, perhaps never. Yeah.
This is a good point for me to say, because I forgot in my introduction and I got carried away, that there is a Q&A function. You'll see it on the bottom of your screens. So if you want, I see there's a couple of things in there already, but if you want to put in questions, we'll probably speak. I've got another couple of questions for the speakers, and then in about 5 to 10 minutes, I will take your questions. So if you have any thoughts, please put them in there. I suppose there's a kind of looming international backdrop to this conversation, which is the environmental crisis, and not just biennials, but exhibition, production, art fairs, all of that obviously has a huge environmental impact, and the kind of that agenda of moving towards more sustainable and carbon neutral art economy is a really big topic of discussion currently. And in some ways, the kind of the lockdowns of last year was a moment of very brief, I'm sure, unfortunately, reprieve for the environment. So I wondered if, I'm not sure who wants to come in on this first, but if you have thoughts as to how we can, what the kind of future of large, is there a future for sustainable, and I mean that in the broadest sense of the term, large scale exhibition making?
I like to add that the UNESCO SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 points that they've been promoting for the past decade, have been our Bangkok Art Biennale's escape routes, sub-themes that we propose to the artists. I give one example of the VR by Marina, Abramovich, which was shown in various places. But now we showing it for the first time in Southeast Asia. It's about glaciation and the meltdown of Antarctica and all that. And Marina is the one who is in the VR and is fighting the climate change and all that. So we have many artists who actually took up this idea of not so much climate change, but also diaspora, migration, pollution, water, racism. And all these are the issues that in fact face us every day. But I think the artists are more conscious now, and they have this ability to convey their messages in many forms. For instance, right now, we have one performance artist from Canada, and he's doing live performance, and it's about Afro diaspora. So in this way, the way performance can also communicate on such themes. And I want to emphasize that digital is okay, and we have to live with it. But live is also more important, and that's why we have artists like Melati coming over, Horuyan coming over to do their performances. So in this way, we have to adapt and use in such a way that we can put the message. And I think the theme for the next 4 or 5 years will be on this survival in context of sustainability. But mind you, it would take another 4 or 5 years for the world to recover.
Reem or Natasha, do you want to?
I mean, of course, I agree with Dr. Apinan on like the live, of course, is very important, which I was also just talking about. But I think it's also, for me, my concern is that all the solutions to what's been going on. I mean, the pandemic, everything that we're kind of going through now, other than the actual virus, actually has been around, but the pandemic just served to highlight it or to kind of like make it more urgent. The environmental concerns have been around for decades, actually. But the pandemic might urge us to kind of deal with them, in a faster way. My concern is that so far I have seen very little. The solutions that people have come with have basically just been like a reframing of what's been going on. It hasn't been really solutions that are actually thinking outside of what's going on or thinking of some form of like exit strategy. I mean, we all recognize it, but I really think, going from an exhibition to a digital exhibition, that does not really address a specific change. So my concern, I think I agree with Dr. Apinan, is that I think that the digital has facilitated many things, and I do think this is one of the things that will stay. But of course, the live will come back, and I actually think that the large exhibition will come back, because again, we have not dealt with any of this in a new or kind of like emancipated way. We've just kind of like put the same solutions into it, So I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but I think that I haven't seen kind of change at the root of things for us to think that a substantial change. It might take a lot more years, like Dr. Apinan was saying.
I wonder if, Natasha, you have anything to say to that.
Sure. And I believe that the question of climate change and the climate crisis is it needs to also vitally be thought of as socially engineered. There's obviously, again, there's been the questions of race, of class, of the erasure of indigenous knowledge. That's not something that is only to be seen at a surface level. That kind of centuries of erasure needs to now be brought to the foreground. So one thing, of course, is, when really thinking about sustainability in terms of, are we going to use recycled material to build walls? That's one way to think about it. Are we going to build walls from, mushrooms or some kind of fermentation process? That's one way of thinking about it. we have Lynn Hirschman-Leeson, who has been doing research on smart bacteria that have been evolved to address plastic levels in water. So that there are artists who do such work who we learn from, and we feel Biennale platforms should obviously take that up in an active sense. Also, the way that artistic thinking is addressing this crisis, but at the same time, for us, it has also been vital to ensure that there are indigenous voices at the center of the 13th Gwangju Biennale. And this is not something that we do in a cosmetic sense. It is not a kind of a way to address the times. I really find it, quite problematic to think it should be thematized over the next 5 years, because that slow violence of centuries is actually another kind of geological time of erasure. And so we are addressing that very much. And I don't think it's possible to do this work, the work of processing the damage, of what is happening to the biosphere, without those voices really anchoring us in our messages.
I think, yeah, that absolutely, I don't think anyone would dispute that. It's an absolutely valid point. Conscious of time slipping away from us and there being many questions in the Q&A box, I'm going to move over to some of the audience questions. First one, very easy to answer. Will there be a recording? Yes, there will. It will be on the Frieze website probably from tomorrow. The second question is about digital shows and income generation, something that we haven't really talked about, actually, the kind of economics of this whole system. But I don't know if any of you want to come in on that in terms of the possibilities that the digital particularly offers in terms of an increased or a different revenue stream or model. No thoughts. I mean, I think it's in a way, it's like that. Not to be pat about it, but it is the $1 million question, isn't it? I mean, how to make revenue from content that currently is being provided, as Reem alluded to, by absolutely everybody for free. Natasha, were you going to say something?
Again, this is something I don't have a direct answer to, of course, but I am thinking that in this moment, it also feels that access to culture, again, like perhaps like the Bangkok Biennale or Sharjah, I mean, the kind of phenomenal work of making contemporary culture available. I think there has never before been a moment more urgent to do so. The kind of alienation that the body and mind has faced is so dramatic that I genuinely believe that we are doing work that has to do at this point with trauma management and recovery processes. And in that very sense, it's very idealistic. I'm not standing, the person handling the tickets envy that position for sure, but I'm actually thinking about the broader picture of what one can do to direct a process that hopefully can help, can sort of just enable what it means to decipher, and at a sensory level to just literally cope with what we are going through. So
Absolutely.
In terms of digital content, it is very, very difficult to, of course, various platforms have been very clever to make digital events ticketed, and good on them. But for us, our public programs have remained open and freely available. Publications also, to an extent, there are smart ways to do a kind of a combination of sales and online availability. I mean, I think we're all really trying to make the hybrid combinations work, but the larger picture is the human one. As you know, is the fact that there is a psychological question as well, not only an economic one.
I think that's a great point. Next question from Marie Taverneau. One of the buzzwords during the pandemic was collaboration. So she was wondering if there have been instances of collaboration between biennials across the world, or ones that you guys know of or have been involved in. Perhaps that one's another one, maybe Natasha, for you.
We are actively, just to keep it short, I saw that there's an immense number of questions. We are actively collaborating with all kinds of institutions. So it's not only Biennale to Biennale partnership. We're actually having co-commissions with the VAC, where Daphne IS works, with, with OCA. We shared some of our programming content for their upcoming publication. So I think there are various ways to do co-commissioning as well. And I think we're very excited to think about co-commissioning, not only in a monumental sense, but rather really very much at every level of Biennale production.
I mean, one that I am aware of, so in the UK, the Liverpool Biennial, which was due to take place last year, will take place this year, is in a kind of, I suppose it's a collaboration called the Biennale Partnership, the Perennial Biennial, it's called, with Bergen Assembly, Ljubljana, Berlin Biennale, and Riga, which they will kind of develop a model which kind of, I suppose, aims to firstly be more sustainable, but also as a kind of exchange of ideas and knowledge between those cities, the idea that the biennial in parts and iterations will travel. So that's one thing that I think is, obviously collaboration has been happening, but perhaps accelerated by the biennial. Next question. We've kind of touched upon this, but during the pandemic and the rapid rise of internationalism, have you found that the local has become less important within the staging and ethos of biennales? I'm not quite sure I understand this question. Do you think that the local has become less important in the context of the pandemic, or more important? Maybe Apinan, you can speak to this.
Yes, I would say much more important. And there's always a reaction from the local sectors, when any biennale is staged, the idea, what about us? Where are we? Where are the local artists? Where are the local audience? Are we just simply parachuting in the big names? But for example, in our previous and this edition, not only we have the curator selection, we have open call. And we have more than 500 applicants from all over the world, and including Thai artists. And we've discovered that there are many amazing young Thai artists in this Bangkok Art Biennale, and they are so refreshing, and they themselves feel that they are, it's like a launching pad for them, because they're having their work shown next to Viola or next to John Akamfra. So in this way, it's like it's a rejuvenation whereby the local art scene and the local artists are expecting something, because we continue these openings whereby not just the artists, but the local people. I think because we intentionally go to places where not a lot of contemporary art is actually presented. Like I gave the examples of the temple. The communities around the temples, they're very inquisitive, very interested. But a lot of people said, why put contemporary art in the temples? So I replied to them that if we take all the artisanal works by the masters out of the temples, what is there left in the temple? Nothing. So in this way, the artists actually pay tribute, pay respect to the heritage works, and they actually work within the local context. So in this way, especially because we don't have so many international visitors, we promote and get the local involved, as well as the expats. Not a lot of people talk about the expats living in various places. They are very much interested, and we actually selected artists living in Bangkok. French artists, in this case. Actually, he collaborated with this farm that grew mushroom. When Natasha was saying that collaboration with this artist, Francois Roche. He actually experimented and grew mushroom, and it's about the cure of Alzheimer. So during the 3 months, we grew the mushroom, and people can go high when they eat it. Yeah.
that sounds great.
Yeah.
Next question. Someone is asking, and this perhaps is a good one for you, Reem, because I know that in Sharjah, a lot of the installations were outside in kind of public spaces. Do you think that maybe the pandemic has pushed art into the great outdoors? Do you think there's a kind of future for large scale exhibitions that are happening outside?
I mean, I'm not in Sharjah anymore or now, but actually Sharjah Biennale specifically has a long history of kind of sprawling into the city with public artworks and also like works that also engage the community and the public. And actually that was always one of like the desires and ambitions of the biennial and thoughts of how to engage the public is to actually go out into the city. I mean, especially in the beginning also when there wasn't, the audience was kind of, small. So the thinking was very much is just like kind of go outside, be in the city, be where people live. And then slowly like that also kind of generates audience and interest. I mean, I think I've always thought that it's such a great idea if it works with the artwork. I mean, nothing obviously that's like kind of forced on there. So yeah, I think it's a good idea.
We've got an interesting question here about whether there has been a conscious practice in calculating the carbon footprint of hosting an exhibition or biennial. If not, why not? And if so, is that data available to the public? Perhaps Apinan or Natasha, you can speak to that in the context of the projects that you're working on currently.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Is there a kind of way, are there tools for calculating the carbon footprint of an exhibition or event? And if not, would that be a good idea? And if so, if that is part of your kind of calculations, where is that information and should it be made public?
I think there is always the concept of difference. So there's not going to be the carbon footprint whereby there's a manual whereby you can follow it. You can do it to a certain extent, but like we talked earlier, that each specific sites and place and nodal points have their own DNA, as it were. So in this way, you can have the basics, and I agree, we should have some sort of guideline, because post-pandemic comes, it's going to be a guideline to help those who have not experienced. And there are many events and art events that have been postponed or canceled. They have been waiting, and they don't know how to get the grips with all these complications that we are facing. So in this way, we can help them to guide what we have gone through, what we have daily suffered, as it were, so they can experience this. But I think, yeah, I think some guidelines should necessarily be made, but like I said, there are going to be large-scale biennales, smaller ones, government run, artist run, corporate run. So that different kinds of biennales. It's not going to be just one that fits all. But I just want to go back a little bit in terms of public and digital.
Yeah.
Public and digital. Because what we have done here is that because some of the people are confined and maybe a little bit afraid to go to public places, we have put on, we work with various corporate places where they have giant digital screens. What I mean, literally gigantic. So we have worked with the artists. For example, Rachel McLean from Glasgow, Lu Yang from Shanghai, Melati, to have their videos shown every hour, you know, so, during the nighttime. So the exposure, we've like millions of exposures from the people who see it in public spaces. So in this way, digital can be used in such a way that can you know, go around, whereas it becomes public, as well as the use of the new media. Yeah, thank you.
That actually there are quite a lot of questions here left that are kind of asking a slightly similar thing, which, if I might crudely summarize, is about the idea that the possibility that the digital offers for lowering barriers to access for arts and culture, and that it, you know, the fact that you don't have to travel somehow removes some of the kind of obstacles and a particular, I suppose, kind of an elite level of access to many international cultural events. Natasha, I suppose you kind of touched upon that a bit in terms of making your public programming all kind of online and accessible, but I wondered if anybody else had got input on that. It's something a lot of people are asking in various forms.
So can I
sorry, Natasha, go.
A slight departure just because I feel like these questions that are about the digital, I mean, I obviously understand where they come from, and we're trying to activate as many processes as possible virtually. But just one of the things that we're also really addressing with the Gwangju Biennale is thinking with technologists and sociologists who are also looking at you know, the way in which algorithmic violence works. So the fact is, as we know, that our data trails are also a massive space for a new kind of frontier of extraction, and that is also something that we do not want to be oblivious to. You know, that, I mean, speaking again from Korea, you know, there is an immense question of surveillance. There is a lot of negotiation between private and public space that is not negotiated through technological processes that are picking up pace at a degree that you know, is dizzying. And so just to kind of highlight that we do feel that it is not something that, you know, we can just sort of blast everything online and at least not have the awareness of what a lot of you know, scientific and theoretical thinkers are talking about in terms of also what is happening in terms of ownership of data, etc.
Absolutely. Apinan, sorry, you wanted to come in on that.
I just wanted to say that in terms of learning virtually, we have you know, all through the 3 months that we've been doing, we have done what we call BAP. BAP means Bangkok Art Biennale. BAP talk, BAP walk, virtual tours, and all the talks are posted and people can enjoy them. And what we want to continue, because we're already planning for the Bangkok Art Biennale 2022. So we are making the BAP Academy. It's going to be Bangkok Art Biennale Academy, whereby during this year, towards the 2022, we'll be doing just that. You know, the virtual discussion and especially groom the people, how to have the, how can I use it, the immune system to survive the post-pandemic. So in this way, we want to, you know, get the younger artists or, you know, art people, art administrators, curators to be involved, to be prepared for what is coming, because it's not just COVID-19, but and now we should call it COVID-20, because you know, it's become COVID variant, and we don't know what else is going to be coming. And definitely there are going to be other diseases and other things that will be life-threatening. So we have to be totally prepared. But I want to emphasize that art must be very much part of this survival game.
On that, I want to close with a question to each of you of my own before we finish shortly. But just, this is kind of a top of head. What do you think is going to be the biggest change or tendency in Biennale making looking forward to 2030? What is going to be the biggest difference, or is everything going to look the same? First to Reem.
I think I think it's a difficult question because we're still going through it. So I think it's really difficult to actually try to, I mean, we don't even know what next month is going to look like or what we're going to be able to do. So I think it's a very difficult question. So I'm not sure I can answer it, but I mean, there's been a lot of focus on the local, like many people said, and like also Natasha and Dr. Apinan were emphasizing within their own biennials, and I think we will probably see more of that. I was just reading about parcours, which Koyoko and Mauro Petroni, I think, started in Senegal. There's Colombia International in Palestine, which also works on this model of bringing different institutions in with no theme, of kind of just making it as a space for art and knowledge kind of like production, or a center for art and knowledge production, without the kind of the without the chains of a biennial model or form. So I don't really know, but I think that there will be kind of things that are again like more focused on the local, with an engagement of with trying to sustain some sort of engagement with artists from kind of similar regions, or from
That's a great response. Natasha, what does the biennial look like in 10 years' time?
Yeah, I also don't want to play the kind of forecasting sort of role, but I just wanted to share the fact that I've actually tried to kind of create a sort of personal economy of my own practice, which has very much been about working with small scale platforms in simultaneity with the bigger platforms. And so that has meant, for instance, also working in Sri Lanka on an independent arts festival where we have very different questions than, say, something like the Gwangju Biennale. And so there we're actually already trying to think, rather than only the digital, really what are the forms of collaboration that can happen, in the sense that we're already thinking about how, if international artists cannot travel, what kind of local artistic contributions can there be? Because I did see certain questions from artists in the Q&A box, where what happens to the local artists? We don't want to localize in a way, especially in this island where there has been decades of civil war. So there needs to be a certain degree of internationalism or an international conversation. And so the way we're trying to frame that is actually by building very new kinds of bridges between the international artists and their productions, and what can be done really in equal partnership with local actors. And that's, it's a process. We don't know the outcome, but I just wanted to put that out there. And I do feel that the Biennale model, of course, again, it has its variants, like it has been said, but I think it will have even more variants and variables. And it's going to be exciting to really look at what kind of, are we going to see a new form of temporality, rather than this kind of cycle that we know feels far too strenuous and short. So yeah, that's what I would add.
Absolutely. Dr. Apinan, anything to add to that finally?
Amy, with that question, it means that it's going to be Biennale in the next 10 years. So it's not bye-bye Biennale. It's going to be a variety, variant Biennale. And, I would think that the audience who maybe are kids today, or there'll be artists in 10 years' time, they're going to be having so many tools in terms of digital, in terms of filmmaking, in terms of, because in 10 years' time, things are going to be, moving so fast, so differently. And Biennales may be too old. I mean, things like equivalent to Biennales may happen every 6 months, because I think the fastness, the speed of technology we have more borderlessness, whereby people can create quicker, but imagination is so rich. So in this way, there may be no biennales in that format. They're going to be something of the constant creativity, maybe. But I won't be there in 2030, so I don't know what happens.
Well, thank you all so much for that. And I'm sorry that we have run out of time to get to everybody's questions. I hope that everybody that's watching has taken at least something from the wonderful insights of all three speakers. Obviously, big topic, and I hope that this provokes more questions and more discussion and more thinking through of different models and different temporalities, as Natasha said, for exhibitions in the future. Thank you all for speaking. Thank you all for joining. There are more talks coming up that SEAfocus have organised. You can sign up to them on their website. There's a discussion on the value of art, which is happening tomorrow on Friday. And then there's a conversation with the collectors Don and Mira Rubel on Saturday the 30th. Also to say, in terms of old and new, it's Frieze's 30th anniversary this year. And we're beginning a year of of anniversary celebrations with a program of talks and events called the Anniversary Sessions, which is happening later in February, and which will also coincide with us launching a new membership scheme. So stay tuned for that. You'll learn more on the website and if you follow us on social media. The recording, as I forgot to say at the start, but hopefully you saw in the answers, will go online on the Frieze website. We try and do it within 48 hours, so it should be up over the weekend if you want to watch this back. Thank you all. Thank you to SEAfocus, and have great days and evenings. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ami.
Bye.
Bye.